Howdy all of you delicious people, I'm here today to review Hellraiser from 1987. So, I say that because there have been a plethora of different variations of Hellraiser over time. Plus, at some point, there may be another different variation of Hellraiser coming in the future that might be a show, possibly. And it seems that they are to go on and take Pinhead and make him a female character, which I'm like, okay, like I don't like to me, I don't think it matters as long as it's a good story, or has really interesting effects. Like if it has a combination of just good everything, um, then I'll just be like, okay, I just wanted like a good version of this of Hellraiser. So with that said, um, obviously for this first movie you could tell that they were trying to like figure things out and eventually give us what came in later movies to be like, ooh, wow, this is kind of really interesting, this is a cool approach. Because in this first movie they focus so much on Frank and Julia in this film that everybody else is just kind of an afterthought. Or just like, well, eventually we're gonna get to this character doing this in this movie, but we just that Frank and Julia thing are so much in the focus. Um, but I would have to say that I also like enjoy this movie, even though some people could be like, I didn't like this movie; it's too gory. Uh, there's like skin and body parts attached to certain things, and uh, like you have a face that has to be put together like a puzzle on the ground. What the is this? Uh, hooks being put into certain people's bodies. What kind of movie is this? It's a horror film. At some point, horror movies are going to get very gory, and this ends up being one of them. So as well as a person who is to regenerate himself slowly but surely, as if he's Brendan Fraser's The Mummy, um, within this film. So, for this movie, my quick grade of this film would be a solid okay, just because I will possibly like more of what we get somewhere down the road. Um, but not every Hellraiser is to be the greatest thing since sliced bread with every single installment. I think the last Hellraiser movie that I seen, what would be more recently, was something that I really did not like. Whatever the last one was, I don't remember what they called it, but I saw it somewhere. I'm like, man, this one just kind of like they drastically were trying to do something different, and it was nothing that I liked. Um, it was just like, man, just like that was rough. But um, every Hellraiser movie has to give you something different. Anyways, why not just give me more of the same? That sounds great. Uh, anyways, so with this first movie, there's some potential there. So, with that said, let's tee up this movie and talk about what it's about. So, in this film, we of course have a guy named Frank who is to somehow uh, buy off a man a Pandora's box. That seems to be what it is to be called in this film. So, we have this Pandora's box, or just box, of which that'll just call this thing in throughout this review. Frank goes on, gets his box, brings it home, and is to unleash what is to be Pinhead in the Cenobites. So Frank is to be collected by Pinhead and the Cenobites to go into hell and be tortured and feel pain beyond anything. And so somehow or another, Frank, you would think that the story of this character would be over, but you would be somehow wrong. So we then have Larry's brother, Frank, that is to move into Frank's home, and with a drop of blood here or there being placed into a room, all of a sudden we find out now Frank was to have the ability to regenerate himself through blood. And so Frank is to have a backstory placed in this film with Julia, who is Larry's lover and new wife, because his previous wife was to die, and Larry is to still have a daughter named Christy from that first wife of his. And so Julia is to go on and be familiar with Frank, and so she's to decide to do anything to help Frank, to the point of Julia serving up some men for Frank to drain the life out of. And then we go on and have Chrissy, who is to figure out what's going on, and she ends up getting pulled into this story and is to try to put everything right, but it eventually goes horribly wrong. And so Chrissy, of course, by the end of this movie, is having this whole entire house collapse behind her as Christy and her love interest, Steve, is to try to get the heck out of that house. I'm like, man, how many times have we gone on and had a movie where the house collapses? Look at Poltergeist. Like, the house just sucks into itself. And I don't know how many times we would probably have, like, the sucked into itself house visual happen. To where I just be like, man, they just ripped that off from Poltergeist. And at the end of the movie, like, at the end of Poltergeist, we had the TV that ends up getting shoved out of the hotel. And that's how the Poltergeist movie ends. For those of you that don't remember Poltergeist, the original one, not the remake, with Rockwell, whatever the Rockwell guy was. Anyways, moving on. So, Hellraiser. Yeah, let's just go into spoilers, because I've already kind of teed up this movie. Yeah. Let's go on. Spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about the time we can do that to spoil this movie. I don't know, I really didn't have much to go on and talk about in between the double 5-time count. And so really it's either you're interested in Hellraiser or you could care less. So with that said, let's go on into spoilers about this one. So we kind of have like a Gremlins approach to Hellraiser, weirdly, because we have Frank, and here's the thing, like, I kind of want backstory about so many characters, but we don't have enough time because this is only an hour and 30 minutes throughout this whole entire movie. So, like, we don't understand why any of this is to really happen within this film, because not enough backstories to be done. It's to just be like, well, you have to just make your own conclusions about things. So Frank is to go on and find this random guy who is to have this Pandora's box, and this guy is asking Frank, it's like, well, hey, sir, are you interested? And Frank is to go on and say, like, well, of course I'm interested. So Frank is to get the box and is to go home and is to decide to figure out this Pandora's box and to open it. And so all of a sudden, Pinhead with a bunch of the Cenobites, Butterball, female Cenobite, because doesn't really have much of a name, Chatterer, and maybe the engineer. We don't know. Maybe he's in the background, just kind of hanging loose. Not quite sure. No. Anyways, so Pinhead is to obtain Frank and to torture him and to put him through pain beyond the normal threshold of things. So, and we are to go in and see a number of visuals that is to take place where Pinhead and the Cenobites are to continue to dwell, where we have a whole entire face that is to be put together like it's a puzzle piece, and we have like skin and things of flesh and like ears and body parts that are to be kind of placed upon this thing that is just kind of dangling back and forth. Because we, of course, have Pinhead, who is to go on and hook into people and then is going to grab and pull away parts of a person. So, somehow or another, you would think after Frank gets obtained by Pinhead and his people, story would be over, but instead, Frank is to somehow reappear in the story, and we'll get to that. So, after Frank is to go on and is to find out that his brother is to no longer live in this house, Larry decides to go on and obtain the house and is to ask Julia. It's like, well, hey, like, Julia, like, do you want to like live in this house, get like a fresh start? And so Julia is to just kind of be weirded out by some of the decor, and it seems that also in one room there seems to be like a little bed and stuff kind of prepared, and so Julie and Larry are thinking that some squatter is there, but come to find out it was just Frank with certain pictures, of course, that he has taken while being with a number of other women, and maybe men. I don't know. Maybe it's the one picture that Julia didn't find. I don't know. So Julia is to find all these pictures, and she's to see this one photo, and she, of course, is to tear it off to just see Frank's face. So we have Julia at one point who is to remember Frank coming into this house at one point and saying that Frank is to be the brother Frank, that he's coming to Julia's home because he is there for the wedding, and Larry is not there. So Frank, of course, asks Julia for a towel. So now we are to go on and have Larry be starting to go on and move certain items. And I guess they are to go on and have these movers move this mattress. So here's the thing. When you're to have a mattress is pretty difficult to try to put up a flight of stairs. But also, with this technical flight of stairs, like it has like a lot of goofy things about it. And the way of which that they're going to approach this just kind of feels very weird, because there seems to be a number of like railings that what they could technically do is they could just have a kind of feeding system where they could take this mattress and kind of just slide it up all of these railings, and that would honestly be a lot quicker because they have a number of guys that can all just kind of push this mattress to easily get past all these flights of stairs, but they don't do so. So, they end up doing it the most awkward way, And come to find out, Larry, while trying to get this mattress up this flight of stairs, is to stab himself with this nail, but I'm getting far too ahead of myself. So they start moving this mattress that is honestly, it seems way too difficult for these three people to move. Here's the thing, if I can go on and easily move a mattress and box spring single handedly by myself, yes, down 2 flights of stairs, but like, we have three people who are having a rough time with the mattress. Uh, like, I would assume it would be a mattress. Um, but here's also the thing, I just kind of find it dumb that they kept the plastic wrap on, or the plastic sheet on for this mattress. Like, I would much rather take the mattress out, because you have there's several handles off to the side. I'm taking too much time for this, but anyways, it is what it is. So if three people can't move a mattress, there's some wrong things going on in this film. So the movers end up getting exhausted, and they're like, "Hey, can we have a beer?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, if you're exhausted and you're gonna have a beer, one, you're drinking on the job, but two, you want a beer?" It seems like a stupid mistake. But so we have Julia and we have Larry, who's kind of looking at one another, and Larry's like, "I'll go and get the beer, because I have nothing better to do." So all of a sudden, Chrissy is to come in to see this house, this new house that Larry and Julia are living in, because Larry had called Christy and had mentioned that they're moving into this house, and Larry is really wanting Chrissy to move in with them. But Chrissy's like, "No, I want my own place, so I want to be independent, and I feel like it's the right move." And Larry's like, "Well, okay, but hey, I get that you're trying to be I get that you're trying to be an adult and this and that, but hey, if you want to move back in, you can move back in." But anyways, so Larry offers to just say well, hey, since you're if you like, you can come and just drop in and just see us. So Chrissy drops in and is to see both Larry and Julia. So we have Chrissy, who's talking to Larry and mentioning "Hey, I'll give you the grand tour of the whole entire house after we go on and move this mattress that is still taking an absurd amount of time to be able to move with three people, because I can move a mattress and box spring single-handedly, but three people have problems. I'm confused." What a bitter piece of this guy is. Just complaining about a mattress being moved. Believe me, I spent years moving mattresses and box springs single-handedly. It's not as difficult as it seems. So Larry is to go on and tell Chrissy to go on and meet with Julia, because really Julia is taking all this rough, because she's really uneasy about moving. So Chrissy's like, "Well, what is she not uneasy about? Give me the list." And Larry's like, "Come on." And so Chrissy's like, "Okay." So Chrissy goes on and is trying to work this sink, and all of a sudden, weirdly, the sink busts. And instead of Julia, I guess, figuring out a way to solve this problem of a sink now busted, she instead is to go and desperately ask where towels are. And all of a sudden, Julia is having these flashbacks about the time of Frank and her being together. And so Chrissy is to go on and ask for towels, and so Julia is to give Chrissy these towels. So we supposedly go on and have Larry going on and figuring out the whole moving situation with the rest of the items and stuff. So we have the movers that are asking Larry. It's like, hey, like that Chrissy is a good looking woman. It's like she must get all of her looks from her mother, and Larry's like, well, like that's not her mother. Like her mother passed away, and like Larry had gone on to remarry. So the movers go on and do their job eventually at some point. So we have Larry and Julia eventually going on and having this like this opening house party, or the first kind of get together while they are to go on and have had a successful move in. So after Larry, of course, is to stab himself with this nail and is to go into this room and be talking about how much he's going to pass out because of all the blood. And Larry's going to have a really good story to talk about at this dinner party because of him possibly going to pass out with all this blood. So Larry's to drip, drip, drip onto this ground, and so Julia is to look at it as if she's weirdly some doctor that is going to nurse this hand back to health. And so Julia's looking at Larry, is like, well, I think you're going to need stitches. Really? I wouldn't think that he would need something like that. So just slap a band-aid on it, you wuss. No. Come on! Like, just go ahead and just, like, wrap a towel on it. You'll be fine. Just spray some Windex on it. You'll be good. Like, God, what was it? There was some comedian, I think it might have been Eddie Murphy, where he did something where it's like, oh yeah, just spray some Windex on it and you'll be fine. Or no, it might not have been Eddie Murphy. It might have been just somebody that was going on and saying that. Spraying Windex on it and you'll be fine. So we go on, and so fast forward to Larry and Julia at this housewarming party, and so Chrissy is to be there with Steve, who is going on and weirdly doing things with this cigarette, and he's going on and doing like the grease move, or maybe that was Grease 2, where the guy puts the cigarette in his mouth, in and out of his mouth weirdly. Like, I hope at some point, like, that would always be the worst decision, because I'm just thinking of, like, man, what if you just go on and you drop that and you just light your house on fire? Wouldn't that be dumb? Because you do this little trick thing. So we go on into this story, and Julia is to make her way up the stairs and is to hear something. She opens this door and is to all of a sudden realize that Frank is to be regenerating himself in this room, to where he's really at this point just kind of skin and bones, but kind of very decayed looking skin. So Frank is to tell Julia, help me, God, help me. And Julia's like, sure, because come to find out, we are to realize that Julia was to have an affair on Larry with Frank. Because Frank was to come to Julia's house, or wherever Julia was having a home, maybe with Larry. And so Frank was to drop by because the wedding between Julia and Larry is happening. So Frank is to go on and be soaking wet, and is to, of course, get a towel from Julia and to kind of dry himself off. And so Frank is to tell Julia that he is the brother, Frank, like, I'm here for the wedding. And so Julia is like, oh, okay, like, come on in, Frank. So we have Frank and we have Julia talking to one another, and the further that they are to go on and be with one another, the more it seems that there is some uh, certain kind of tension between them two, which is to all of a sudden forcibly have them be in the throes of passion within this bed. And so Julie is asking Frank about the whole wedding thing, and Frank is to go on and not really care about all that. Like, all he's caring about is this moment that they're having together. And so, but eventually Julia is to go off and marry Larry, and Frank is to be by himself, eventually going on and finding some Pandora's box and going to hell, it seemed. So Julia was telling Frank at one time that she will do anything for him, and Frank is like, anything? And Julia is like, anything. And so I guess that's to be tied to what Julia is to go on and do for Frank now. So Julia is to let Frank stew until she can go on and find some folks. I guess no one at this party, so that is what it is. So we eventually let everybody go on and go their separate ways. So we, within this party, I think, have both Christy and both Steve kind of walking their way home. And we find out that both of these characters are lovers. And because I was just kind of, I didn't think about that before, or I didn't know if any dialogue like was to state that they were both together, but I guess they were. And Chrissy is to see this homeless man. That seems very shady, because Chrissy, of course, was to be working at this pet shop where she was to be like working there for her first day, because she is to move to possibly a new town where she is to get this new job, and so this is her first day. So Chrissy's working at this pet store, and it seems that the manager was to go on this lunch break, and all of a sudden we have one woman with one problem, of course, because this always happens in a store where when somebody who's to have most of the information is to go on break, and all of a sudden like 30 different people will come to you and like, hey, yeah, like so and so person was to like tell me about this one thing, and is he here? And it's like, no, like he's coincidentally on break. Or that always happens when you go on and you're just kind of working a shift, and like some other guy was there on some day, and then you would it's always like that in a retail store or just any store in general. So Chrissy is to go on and notice that there is this homeless man that is dipping himself into this I want to say it's like a tank full of bugs, and he just starts eating his these bugs off of his hand. And so Chrissy's like, you're gonna get out of here, go on, shoo. You would have thought she would have called the authorities, but she didn't. That would be one thing, to just be like, hey, you should probably call the cops on this guy. So even though like, hey, like this guy is probably cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but it is what it is. So Chrissy is to go on and see this homeless person again. And you would just think at some point that Chrissy would just be like, I think this guy's following me. So, anyways, going further into this film. So, after this party is to all be done and over with, you would have thought Julia would have grabbed one of these rando people at this party and would have fed them to Frank, but she doesn't. Instead, Julia is to go on later and is to find these rando guys and start feeding them to Frank one by one, by promising them that they're going to be in bed with Julia or sleep together, as she is to go on and find this random guy in some location. So for the first time around, it seems that there is to be like a learning gap that ends up happening here, where Julia is to go on, and the first time around, she is to like go with this guy into this place, start taking off his clothes, and the guy's like, "Oh, there's no bed in here," and Julia's like, "No, we're gonna do something different." And so the guy's like, "Oh, okay, well, hey, difference always is new or whatever." So this guy starts taking his clothes off, and Frank starts to get ready for what he's going to do here. So Julia ends up going on and finding this weapon to attack this first man with and take him down. But then eventually Julia is to take this hammer and is to have like this hammer just kind of in this special location that she is to go on and grab it every single time and bash these guys a couple of times with this hammer. So Julia is to go on and is to slowly but surely have Frank start to regenerate. Um, and I thought like this was so interesting to kind of slowly but surely see this guy kind of regenerate, but it is what it is with this film. So and they really just take so much time with that. So we have Frank sometimes who is starting to kind of goop and drip and stuff on his hands. At some points, Julia is to try to wash the blood off of her self. Like, I think the first time that this was to happen, we had Julia who was going into the sink and Larry was to come home. And so Julia was to kind of quickly clean herself and go back and meet up with Larry so she could talk to him. So Julia continues on to get these men consistently and feeding them to Frank one way or the other, just draining them of blood. So we finally have it at one point where Larry and Chrissy are having this dinner together, and Larry kind of feels weirded out by Julia, that it feels like she's bizarrely waiting for something. And so he's not quite sure like what that exactly means. So Larry's telling Chrissy, it's like, well, hey, can you just kind of go on and go to the house one day and just kind of talk to her, and maybe she just needs a friend. Maybe just go on and just, like maybe she's just waiting for that perfect person to come around and change things for her. So Chrissy makes her way to the home the one day that Julia is nabbing another man for Frank to consume. So Julia is to bring this man home, and so Chrissy is to all of a sudden spot this and like, okay, this is very unusual. So Chrissy is to start to go into the house, and Julia is feeding another guy up to Frank. And so this time around, it seems that this guy is to be afraid of whatever Frank is, to where he is to grab onto Julia and use her as a human shield, because he somehow cannot get out of this room. So he just holds Julia in front of him, hoping that she'll die first. So instead, we have Frank who pulls away Julia to grab at this man and start to pull him apart. So we have Julia who is trying to hammer a certain number of guys, but not all the time it works perfectly. So we have Chrissy who is starting to make it through the house, asking if anyone's home. And all of a sudden, when Chrissy is to make it upstairs, she is to notice this man who is almost turning into a corpse, lingering out to Christy, and we then go on and have to have Frank, who is to show himself and is to realize that this is Christy, and be like, oh, hey, like, Christy, like, remember me? I'm Frank. Like, I'm your Uncle Frank. I'm a little less skin and maybe a less bone, but I'm Frank. Don't you remember me? Uh, and so all of a sudden, Chrissy is listening to Frank, and Chrissy is terrified, and Frank is to go on and be like, come to daddy kind of thing, like, come on. And so we have Frank saying all these unusual things, and so we have Chrissy, who's to eventually run away from Frank to go into this room to find the Pandora's box. And so Frank is to go on and tell Chrissy, it's like, hey, don't do anything with that thing. And so Chrissy's to go on and chuck this thing out this window. And Frank is like, no! Chrissy goes on and is to run outside, collect this box, and is to just run until she can't run anymore, until she collapses. So it seems that a number of people are to see this woman and decide to do the right thing and call the an ambulance and whatever. So Chrissy is to be taken by the hospital, and we have this doctor that's like, you're awake. Oh, it seems that you were to have this kind of bizarrish puzzle box on you, and hopefully you can figure out whatever this means. And so Chrissy then goes on and is to figure out this puzzle, and is to have the box start to adjust and move and shift. And so all of a sudden, Christy is to open up this Pandora's box, which is to lead to, at some point, Chrissy hearing some uneasy noises. So Chrissy goes on and is to see that this wall all of a sudden is to open, and she is to go through the crack of this and notice this monster who is trying to attack her. And this monster, of course, is to be called the Engineer for some reason. Supposedly, through most of these movies, it seems that the Engineer just appears through these cracks in these walls, or like this little opening in these walls, for the most point. Not quite sure why, but just appears. So this Engineer is starting to chase after Christy, and she tries to eventually go back into this room and is trying to open this door. And that's, of course, when Pinhead and the Cenobites start to appear. And so we have one of the Cenobites who's putting like his fingers in this girl's mouth, or fingers around her throat. And so Christy is to mention that Pinhead had to have had gone on and done this to a number of other people, and Pinhead is like, of course, we've taken a number of people, and you'll be next. But Christy's like, well, here's the thing, like, did you ever go after a guy named Frank? And they're like, yeah, of course we have. And Christy goes on and says like, well, like, he must have escaped somehow, because like I've recently seen him. And Pinhead is like, well, like, I guess we're gonna take your word for that. So, like, Christy is saying like, well, hey, like, I can go on and hand him to you if you only like will follow me to where this guy is. So Pinhead and the Cenobites let Christy go. Like, they'll believe her story. So we then go on and are to continue to have Frank push things, because here's the goofy thing. We have Frank, who is to mention that if he had one or two more bodies, he would finally be able to uh, perfectly regenerate himself. But then it seems to take a lot more than that. And a whole man skin to go on and regenerate. So Frank is to then go on and take more of these random guys, guys with tank tops on, so on and so forth, served up by Julia. So we have Frank that is also putting nails into these rats to consume some of their blood, but it's definitely not enough. But Frank is just bloodthirsty at this point. So Julie and Larry are together in the home by themselves, and Frank is starting to again uh, feel pain, or is to just go on and uh, consistently need this serving up of blood. Hence why you would go on and have that one homeless person who is to start to just eat all these bugs from off of his hand, because I guess these things need a consistent serving up of blood to stay alive, or to eventually just keep the form that they're in. So we have Frank that is starting to get bloodthirsty, and so he's bashing throughout his room, and this is all being during a storm, and so Julia and Larry are starting to walk up these stairs, because Larry's like, "What was that noise? I gotta figure out what that noise was." And Julia's like, "No, don't go up there, Larry. Don't go up there." And so Frank is kind of like concerned of whether or not Julia is going to uh, really go on and end up with him, or if she's still in love with Larry. And so, like, he is to just be kind of concerned here. But so Larry is to go on and be like, well, how about we go up the stairs together? And so Julia is trying everything that she can do to keep Larry away from this room. And so Julia is like throwing herself at Larry, forcing them to go up into this bedroom, and all these things. But Larry goes on and is to go into that room anyways, but he finds nothing in there, and Frank is to go into this other room where he is to go on and watch Julia and Larry both going at it. It starts to seem. So Frank is to all of a sudden make it out of this closet, and he is to cut open one of these rats. It's pretty gross, but I've seen worse. So Julia is thinking that something is going to happen to Larry. So, or probably herself. So Julie is telling like Frank, but Larry is thinking that Julia is saying this to him. Julie is consistently saying no, please, no, no, please stop, no, 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 stop, stop. And this is to be Frank. And so Frank is to be tempted to go on and get further and further closer to this bed, but then he decides to leave. So Larry is to pull away with Julia, and Larry is very confused at this point. Larry is telling Julia, it's like, well, wait a minute, like, at some points, like, you can't take your hands off me, and then all of a sudden you're cold and distant. I'm confused. I'm frustrated, woman. I had a whiffy stiffy, but it just went away now, because you just turned me off. Like closed up here. I have a headache. So Larry's realizing that he isn't going to get any of that jelly from Julia. So we now go further into this film. So So eventually, Frank is to start to get all that he is to go on and get at some point. And so when Chrissy is to need to go back to this house and is to try to find Frank, we have it now where Julia is to finally serve up Larry to Frank. And at first, we assume that Larry is normally Larry. And so does Chrissy feel this. And when Chrissy asks Larry, like, what happened to Frank, uh, Larry is to mention that he had to kill Frank, and that's why he looks that way. So Chrissy is to channel Pinhead and the Cenobites to this location, and Hellraiser is to tell Chrissy that he wants the man that did this in this that Pinhead wants the guy who did this to this man. And Chrissy is saying, like, no, don't go after my father, don't hurt my father. And when Chrissy is to try to run away from Pinhead and the Cenobites, going back to Larry and Julia, trying to have Chrissy get comfort from Larry, come to find out, that's when Chrissy is to realize that Larry is actually Frank. So, because Frank is to go on and say some of the same things that he said to her when he was just blood and bones. So, and body parts also. So, Chrissy is to realize that Larry is Frank because of, I guess, the eye color just didn't do enough for her. So, the eye color change. So, now that Chrissy realizes that this guy is Frank, we have Chrissy who's trying to run up the stairs to try to serve up Frank to Pinhead. And so Chrissy goes on, runs up the stairs to have Julia grab her. And so Larry is to have, or Frank is to have this knife. I'm going to keep calling him Frank for the rest of the movie now. So Frank, or the rest of the review. So Frank goes on and is to grab this knife and is to stab into what he thinks is Christy, but come to find out it's Julia by accident. So, since Frank is just like, well, I'm in a consuming mood anyways, he goes after and starts draining Julia, and Julia is like, no, not me. But Julia is probably going to die, so Frank might as well get his consumption done anyways. So, so Chrissy is running up the flight of stairs to make it back into this room. And so when Frank, of course, is to follow Christy, he then realizes he's going to get served up to Pinhead and the Cenobites. And so that all of a sudden is to have all these hooks being put into Frank. And so now we have all of a sudden where Frank is to be kind of like his skin is stretching. And so Frank is to go on and tell Christy that Jesus wept from, I guess, his time in being crucified from before. So, and Frank, I guess, was to not show the same kind of thing. So Pinhead is to still think that this doesn't really even things out. And so Chrissy is to all of a sudden recapture the Pandora's box, or the box, and readjust the cube to where some of these Cenobites and Pinhead start to go back to their previous hell. And so Christy is starting to run through this house as it's starting to collapse behind her. At one point, Steve is to make it into the house, and Chrissy is to try and fight off the engineer again that is to pop out at the end of this film. So Chrissy is to go on and put all these pieces in the right order and close the Pandora's box again. And after it seems that this house is to now all be just wood and pieces and whatever, Chrissy tries to go on and take said box and tosses it into the flames. Where all of a sudden we have this homeless man from before now coming back to be immersed into these flames and is to become this thing called Derelict. And this derelict flying monster is to go on and take this box and is to fly away. I guess to go on and find the next person who is to go on and open this box and eventually let horrible things happen to a number of horrible people. Or good people, who knows? Mistakes could happen. So, with that said, I think that covers most of this movie. At the end of the day, I didn't remember who the actual guy was that sold Frank that box, because I don't know if he had a name. But it seems that the guy goes on and finds the next person who is to be tied to maybe a sequel or maybe not. So with that said, I'm going to get out of here because I know that this movie's an hour and a half, and I try to want to beat to have like a kind of consistent kind of timing of video. So with that said, let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I forgot about, because I'm sure there's a billion things that I did. There's sometimes where there's little details that aren't tweakingly all correct, but at the end of the day, hopefully I could say that I at least got most of this correct. But either way, let me know about Hellraiser, how you like maybe any of the other certain movies, or maybe you like none of them, because that's just you. So at the I don't know, people could kind of honestly feel that Hellraiser is a weird franchise or movie or whatever. Some people may not like them. Or some people may just kind of go into a video, they're like, oh yeah, I definitely don't like this, and I gotta see how I don't like it. And it's like, well, that's great for a comment and all, but I also don't really get that either. Like, if you're discovering it and then you watch it if you discover it for the first time, then you watch it and then you hate it, like, I guess I could be okay with that. But if you kind of go into a thing like knowing that you don't like something, I don't know. Like, I would much rather have people be open-minded than anything else. But speaking of open-minded, I'm going to open-mind myself out of here to get out, to say goodbye. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.